The news media and politicians have recently been declaring that the only equitable resolution to the Arab-Israeli conflict is a two-state solution. Is this a new idea?
We have covered a lot of chapters about Muhammad and his Quran and have demonstrated so far, beyond a reasonable or a shadow of a doubt, that there is not a single letter, word, verse, ayah, or chapter, surah in the Quran that is the product of any compassionate, merciful, and all-knowing divinity. We have shown that the Quran is entirely the product of Muhammad's imagination, his alter ego, cleverly projected into the unsuspecting mouth of Allah, the name of the supreme rock god of the pagan Quraysh, embedded in the corner wall of the Kaaba, called the Black Stone. We have been successful in doing so based entirely on facts pulled from the very Arabic Muhammadan records of the Quran, hadiths, and other manuscripts and books of theirs. We deal with facts, all the facts, and nothing but the facts, because in the final analysis they are more lethal and destructive than any and all lies. We shall of course continue to chip at all the mendacities that protect the fallacies about Muhammad and his Quran, but we shall from now on also address many of the ramifications that Muhammadan Islam, as the worst intellectual and spiritual fraud that has ever been perpetrated upon the human consciousness in the last 7,000 years of recorded history, has bequeathed to the people of the world. I must yet again remind you, our listeners, that not less than 99.999% of humanity are totally ignorant of the facts that we have so far revealed, and the new facts that we are going to demonstrate in a complementary series of chapters regarding the political legacies of Muhammadan Islam that have been and continue to plague humanity from Africa to America and from Asia to Europe. We shall address from now on the subject of Arabian conquests that they proudly call Al-Futuh. The Arabs and other Muhammadans have been flooding the news media all over the world with insults, admonitions, and alleged horrors of Western Christian imperialism, without once addressing the imperialism of the Arabs and the hordes of Muhammadan Islam, from Iraq to Uzbekistan, from modern Syria to Armenia and the Balkans, from Israel to Mauritania, and from the Sudan to France and Italy. We shall explore with you the facts and not the propaganda, the realities and not the myths of these subjects, based entirely on the records that are available for all to check and double-check. Whilst Western imperialism in the Arab world and North Africa lasted less than 100 years, the imperialism of the Arabs continues unabated for the last 1400 years. Whilst Western imperialism brought to the Arabs and other places in Africa and Asia the foundations of democracy, medicine, electrification, water reclamation, education, archaeology, roads, trains and airports, just to name a few contributions, the Arabs and Muhammadan Islam have only brought misery, backwardness, ignorance, tyranny, terror, subjugation, humiliation and illiteracy to their hundreds of millions of conquered peoples for the last 700 years. While the Western imperialists have been atoning for their alleged misdeeds, the Arabs, with an obscene degree of hypocrisy, actually continue to glorify in every mosque sermon, in their books, their TV and all their media, the slaughter of millions and the conquest of Muhammadan Islam on 3 continents, Asia, Africa and Europe, covering an area of about 10 million square miles, and the subjugation, occupation, humiliation and historical eradication of at least 10 civilizations and major cultures. While Western imperialists have apologized to their previously subject peoples, the Arabs have never done the same to anybody, but in fact they do the opposite by gloating and reveling at them. Ladies and gentlemen, as we have demonstrated in many of our chapters, the obvious invariably escapes the attention of the unwary. The people who inhabited North Africa were not Arabs, but Hamitic Africans. They were conquered by the Semitic Arabs and became Arabized after their conquest in the 7th and 8th centuries. Most of them were forced to lose their identity, their culture, their traditions and their religion by the extremism and terror of fundamentalist Muhammadan Islam. Neither modern Iraq, Syria, Jordan or Israel were Arab until and in the aftermath of their subjugation by the Muhammadan Arabs in the 7th century. We have shown that Muhammadan Islam is a theocratic belief system that has no secular component. That fundamentalist Muhammadan Islam believes literally in every word in the Quran as having been revealed by Allah, allegedly God. Please listen carefully to the following Quranic verses that address the issue of the Israelites and their promised land. Al-Isra 17.104. And we said thereafter to the children of Israel, dwell securely in the land of promise. Al-A'raf 7.137. And we made the people considered weak and of no account, inheritors of lands in both east and west lands, whereupon we sent down our blessings. The fair promise of the Lord was fulfilled for the children of Israel because they had patience and constancy. Al-Rum 30.6. It is the promise of Allah, never does Allah depart from His promise. The verses recited earlier are from the very Quran that the followers of Muhammad assert is the words of Allah. If so, on what grounds, either theological or historical, do they claim the whole of the land of Israel only to the Arabs and nothing for the Jews? Does this mean that the all-knowing Allah broke His promise? Nowhere in the Quran, after all, is there a verse that abrogates or overturns the verses above, and hence on Muhammadan Muslim theological foundations alone, the land of Israel belongs to the Jews. Sometimes people make the most fundamental errors. When large numbers of people make mistakes, even monumental ones, it is almost impossible to challenge the resultant prevailing view. For example, it was once the conventional wisdom that the earth is flat. In earlier times, if anyone dared to claim that the earth was round, they would have been burnt on the stake. When, in the 16th century, Nicolaus Copernicus dared suggest that the sun was the center of the solar system and not the earth, he was regarded as a heretic. In today's language, any attempt to explain the Arab-Israeli conflict in terms other than Israel's illegal occupation of Palestinian land and or the denial of Palestinian national aspiration is often regarded like a declaration that the earth is flat and is the center of the universe. But what if this view is wrong? What if, in terms of understanding the Arab-Israeli conflict, we are living in pre-Copernican times? What if the Jewish state, that is considered to be the root of all evil in the Middle East, were instead actually the victim? In our chapter 142, Palestine and Palestinians, we ask several relevant questions to ascertain whether or not such an entity called Palestine and the people called Palestinians actually existed in history. Nowhere in the whole of the Quran, the Ahadith, or all of Arab history is the land of Palestine or the Palestinian people are mentioned, alluded to, or remarked upon. No one has so far answered our questions with any proof that they actually existed. The so-called Palestinians have absolutely no idea where their very name is derived from. They, as usual with the ignorance of Muhammad and his followers, contort and mix up historical places and characters by identifying the Canaanites with the Philistines. What if Zionism is not colonialism, but rather an ancient people's deep connection to their native historical and covenantal land? What if the real colonialism was and is in reality Arab imperialism and expansionism, which contest a Jewish state on even 1/500th of the area of lands conquered by the Arabs? Nearly 4,000 years ago, the forefathers of the Jewish people, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, lived in the land of Israel, which God had promised to them and to their descendants forever. That promise was confirmed at Mount Sinai and was delivered upon by God through Joshua after the death of Moses more than 3,300 years ago, when the Israelites entered the land after being liberated from Egyptian slavery and oppression. About 3,000 years ago, King David established Jerusalem as the capital city of the Promised Land. Nowhere in the whole of the Bible records is there mention of the land of Palestine nor of the Palestinian people. Neither are they mentioned in the Arabic language anywhere throughout the history of the Arabs until 40 years ago. The Jews lived in Judea in the land of Israel for 850 years until their subjugation and the enslavement and the deportation of many of them by the invading Babylonians in 586 BC. They returned in large numbers 70 years later after their liberation by the Persians and remained continuously in Judea for the next 700 years until the eviction of many of them by the Roman Empire in 135 AD.